The universal problem. Hank Murray wiped sweat from his brow as he examined the alien ship's engine. 20 years as a spacecraft engineer had taught him many things, but patience topped the list. The Orion Repair Outpost had become the busiest human station in this sector of the galaxy, and today was proving why. "So you're saying 3 other repair stations couldn't fix it?" Hank asked, glancing at the tall, blue-skinned alien beside him. Captain Zixtal of the Viridian merchant vessel nodded, his neck membranes fluttering with frustration. The Arcturian mechanics said it was impossible. The Centauri engineers claimed our power core was fundamentally flawed. The Rigelian technicians suggested we scrap the entire ship. Hank smiled. He'd heard this story before, many times from many species. It was why alien ships were now lined up for kilometers around the Orion outpost, waiting their turn. "And what exactly happens when you engage your faster-than-light drive?" Hank asked, crawling deeper into the engine compartment. "Power fluctuations begin in the auxiliary systems. Life support weakens. Navigation becomes unreliable. Yet diagnostics show nothing wrong," Zixtal explained, his translator making his frustration clear. Hank nodded, running his hand along a series of cables. Humans had been in space for less than 2 centuries, newcomers compared to most galactic civilizations. Yet somehow, they'd developed a reputation that spread faster than light itself. "If it's broken, the humans can fix it." "Susan, hand me the multi-scanner," Hank called out. His apprentice, a young woman with bright eyes and quick hands, passed him the tool. She had been with the station only 6 months, but was already showing the same knack for unusual solutions that made human engineers famous. Susan leaned in. "What are you thinking, Hank?" "I'm thinking that 3 advanced civilizations shouldn't miss something obvious, so it's probably something non-obvious." He ran the scanner along the power conduits, watching readings that made no sense. The station's intercom crackled. "Hank, it's Alex from Control. We've got 4 more ships requesting emergency docking. Can you speed things up?" Hank sighed. "Tell them we're working as fast as we can. Quality over speed, remember." Captain Zixtal shifted nervously. "Our delivery schedule will be more delayed if we don't fix it right," Hank finished. "Trust me." Susan watched Hank work, noting how he wasn't following standard diagnostic procedures. Instead, he was touching components, listening to subtle sounds, even smelling certain parts. "Why are you doing that?" Zixtal asked, bewildered by Hank's approach. "Sometimes the machine tells you what's wrong, if you listen right," Hank replied. He reached deeper into the compartment, following a hunch. His fingers found what he suspected, a tiny fracture in a cooling shunt that wouldn't show on scans, but would cause precisely the cascade of problems the ship experienced. "Your cooling system has a microfracture. When you engage FTL, the stress creates vibrations that disrupt your power flow," Hank explained, extracting himself from the tight space. Zixtal's eyes widened. "But our scanners wouldn't detect it," Susan finished. "It's too small and in an unusual location." Hank nodded at his apprentice. "We'll need to fabricate a replacement part. Should take about 3 hours." 3 hours? Zixtal seemed shocked. The Arcturians estimated 2 weeks for repairs. Hank shrugged. "Different approach, different timeline. Susan, get started on the fabrication. I'll prep the extraction tools." As they worked, more crew members from the Viridian ship gathered to watch. They whispered among themselves, amazed at how these primitives, humans with their relatively simple technology, could solve what their advanced civilization couldn't. By day's end, the Viridian ship departed, its systems fully operational. And as it left, 3 more alien vessels docked, each with problems deemed impossible elsewhere. Just another day at the Orion Repair Outpost, where human ingenuity had become the most valuable resource in the galaxy. The next morning, Hank entered the main hangar to find Laura Winters surrounded by holographic displays showing the repair crew. As operations manager, she coordinated the station's growing clientele with military precision. "Morning, Hank. That Viridian fix earned us 3 more referrals overnight," Laura said, brushing a strand of red hair from her face. "Word travels fast." "Too fast," Hank muttered, scanning the list of waiting ships. "We're backed up 2 weeks now." Laura nodded. "The Galactic Commerce Guild asked if we consider expanding operations. They're offering funding." This wasn't surprising. In the 5 years since humans had established their first interstellar repair outposts, their reputation had grown exponentially. What started as emergency fixes for passing ships had become a cornerstone of human diplomatic relations. "The Kirtan delegation is waiting in Bay 4, Laura added. "Their chief engineer seems uncomfortable with human assistance." Hank chuckled. "They always are, at first." When Hank arrived at Bay 4, he found a group of tall, insect-like aliens hovering protectively around their ship's access panel. Their chittering translator devices created a buzz of anxiety. "You must understand," the lead Kirtan engineer said, "our technology is quite advanced. We simply need your facility, not your input." Hank had heard this before. Most species with centuries or millennia of spacefaring experience found it hard to believe humans could offer anything meaningful. "Of course," Hank said agreeably. "Mind if I watch?" The Kirtan reluctantly agreed. For 2 hours, they methodically checked systems using sophisticated diagnostic tools. Their frustration grew visibly as each test revealed nothing about why their gravity generators failed during specific maneuvers. Watching from a distance, Susan whispered to Hank, "They're not checking the material fatigue in the mounting brackets." Hank nodded. "Noticed that too." Finally, after exhausting their protocols, the Kirtan lead engineer approached Hank. "Perhaps we would appreciate observations." Hank didn't gloat. He simply walked to the gravity generator housing and ran his hand along the outer casing. "When did you last replace these mounting brackets?" he asked. The Kirtan exchanged confused glances. "They are titanium-beryllium alloy. They do not require replacement." Hank smiled. "In theory, sure. But look here." He pointed to almost invisible stress lines. "Your gravity field creates harmonic vibrations that resonate at exactly the wrong frequency for this alloy. Over time." "Impossible," the Kirtan interrupted. "Our computational models." "Reality doesn't always match models," Susan interjected. "It's actually a common issue with ships that regularly transit between different gravitational fields." The Kirtan fell silent, their compound eyes studying the brackets more carefully. Later, in the station's cafeteria, Laura joined Hank and Susan for lunch. "The Kirtan are requesting regular maintenance contracts now," she said. "Apparently, we humans have unexpectedly practical methodologies." "That's high praise from them," Hank laughed. "How did humans get so good at this?" Susan asked, still relatively new to the station. "Most alien races have had space travel for thousands of years." Hank considered the question. "I think it's because we had to learn from our mistakes." Laura nodded. "Other species developed technologies gradually, perfecting each step. Humans, we rushed into space, cobbling together solutions, adapting as we went." Plus, Hank added, "most advanced civilizations rely completely on automation and AI diagnostics. They follow procedures perfectly." "But they don't improvise," Susan realized. "Exactly. Humans spent centuries fixing cars with duct tape and wire hangers, patching boats with whatever materials were handy, and solving problems with limited resources." Hank sipped his coffee. "That mindset doesn't disappear just because we reached the stars." Through the cafeteria viewport, they watched as another alien ship docked, its hull bearing marks of hard travel. Another puzzle to solve, another impossible problem that would somehow yield to human hands and human ingenuity. Laura's communicator beeped. "The Viridian captain is spreading the word. He's calling it the human touch." Hank smiled. Maybe that was it. After all, word spreads. 3 months later, the Orion repair outpost had doubled in size. New docking arms extended from the central hub like spokes on a wheel, each filled with vessels of different shapes and origins. The station now operated around the clock, with engineers working in shifts to meet demand. "We've got something unusual coming in," Laura announced during the morning briefing. The main screen showed an approaching vessel unlike any Hank had seen before, a perfect sphere with no visible engines or entry points. "What is that?" Susan asked, now leading her own repair team. "A Korthal collective vessel," Laura replied. "They've never requested human assistance before." The room fell silent. The Korthal were known throughout the galaxy as technological purists who considered their engineering to be flawless. They rarely interacted with lesser species, especially humans, whom they viewed as barely beyond primitive. "Must be desperate," muttered Pete Lawson, a burly engineer who had spent 20 years fixing tractors in Nebraska before looking to the stars. His practical farm experience had proven surprisingly valuable in space. When the Korthal ship docked, its outer hull simply rippled, creating an opening. 3 tall, silver-skinned beings glided into the station. Their expressions conveyed clear distaste at having to be there. "We require minimal interaction," the lead Korthal stated. "Our propulsion system has developed an anomaly. We will guide your technicians." Hank stepped forward. "That's not how we work. We need to understand the problem ourselves." The Korthal's luminescent eyes narrowed. "Our technology is beyond your comprehension." "Then why are you here?" Pete asked bluntly. Hours of tense negotiation followed before the Korthal reluctantly allowed Hank and Pete aboard their vessel. Inside, the ship was a marvel of integrated technologies, with systems flowing seamlessly into one another. "No wonder they can't find the problem," Pete whispered. "There are no separate components to check." The Korthal engineer explained in condescending tones that their quantum drive had begun experiencing random power fluctuations that their diagnostics couldn't identify. Pete walked around the engine room, eyes narrowed. Unlike the others, he wasn't intimidated by the advanced technology. He simply knocked on different panels, listening to the sound each made. "What primitive behavior is this?" demanded the Korthal. "He's listening to your ship," Hank explained. Pete stopped at one section. "Here, something's loose inside." The Korthal was indignant. "Impossible. Our systems are molecularly bonded." Pete shrugged. "Maybe so, but something's rattling in there." After much debate, the Korthal allowed them to open the panel. Inside, they found a small crystalline component that had fractured, creating a minute gap that disrupted the quantum field. "Looks like your molecular bonding ain't perfect after all," Pete said with a smile. News of humans repairing a Korthal vessel spread rapidly throughout the sector. Within days, diplomatic communiques began arriving from various governments and trade organizations. "The Galactic Council is discussing human repair capabilities in their next session," Laura reported, reviewing the latest messages. "We're becoming a strategic asset." "Is that good or bad?" Susan asked. "Both," Hank replied. "More business, but also more politics." That evening, as Hank finished his shift, an official from Earth's diplomatic corps arrived at the station. The woman's crisp uniform and serious expression suggested important news. "Engineer Murray, I'm here because the Orion outpost has become a matter of interstellar significance. Several advanced civilizations are expressing concern about human repair monopolies." "Monopolies?" Hank laughed. "We're just fixing ships." "You're doing more than that," she replied. "You're shifting the balance of technological influence. The Korthal have requested formal knowledge-sharing arrangements, and 3 other major powers are suggesting similar agreements." Hank looked out at the dozens of alien ships waiting their turn, each representing a problem that only human hands seemed able to solve. What had begun as simple repair work was evolving into something much more significant. Humanity's first truly unique contribution to galactic civilization. The alarm jolted Hank from sleep at 300 hours. Emergency protocols only activated for critical situations. "All senior engineers report to Base 7, Laura's voice announced over the intercom. "Priority Alpha." When Hank arrived, He found the entire senior staff gathered before an extraordinary sight. Floating in the enormous bay was what appeared to be a ship, though unlike any he'd seen before. Its hull shifted colors like oil on water, with no discernible seams or components. The Nexus 7, Laura explained quietly. It appeared at our outer markers an hour ago. No crew, no communication. What is it? Susan asked, staring at the enigmatic vessel. An unfamiliar woman stepped forward. She was tall, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun and eyes that suggested little sleep. It's a legend until now. I'm Maya Bishop, theoretical propulsion specialist. Earth Central dispatched me when your sensors detected the energy signature. Why is it here? Hank asked. According to the limited records we have, Maya explained, the Nexus 7 appears at repair facilities throughout the galaxy, testing them. It's appeared at 23 facilities in the last millennium. None have successfully repaired it. Pete whistled low. So it's some kind of test. Probably. Maya nodded. Records indicate it has a unique propulsion system failure that seems to defy the laws of physics. After failed repair attempts, it simply disappears, sometimes for centuries. Laura frowned. And now it's our turn. The diplomatic implications if we fail. Or if we succeed, Hank added. Scans revealed little. The ship's hull resisted all conventional sensing methods. Finally, after hours of frustrated attempts, they discovered a single access point that dilated open when approached with specific light frequencies. Inside, the ship was a maze of technology that seemed to combine aspects from dozens of different civilizations. At its center lay the propulsion system, a swirling vortex of energy contained within crystalline structures. It's beautiful, Susan whispered. Maya's instruments analyzed the system. The containment field is degrading in a pattern that shouldn't be possible. It's like the laws of physics are being selectively ignored. For 3 days, they worked in shifts. Every solution failed. Every theory collapsed under testing. The station's reputation hung in the balance as news spread of the legendary vessel's appearance. On the 4th day, as exhaustion set in, Hank noticed something unusual. The field fluctuations. They're not random. What do you mean? Maya asked, barely looking up from her calculations. They follow a pattern, like music, Hank said. Susan, remember that Viridian ship? Their cooling system vibrated at specific frequencies. Susan's eyes widened with understanding. You think this is deliberate? The failure is programmed. No, interjected Gail White, a quiet engineer who rarely spoke during meetings. She had been observing from the corner, making notes. Not programmed, evolved. All eyes turned to her. Look at these patterns, Gail continued, projecting her notes. They're similar to neural networks. I think this ship is partially organic. The propulsion system isn't failing. It's changing. Changing into what? Pete asked. A new form of propulsion, Gail suggested. Our mistake was trying to fix it. We should be helping it transform. Maya looked skeptical. That's a massive assumption based on limited data. But it fits the observations, Hank said, studying Gail's notes. What if the Nexus 7 isn't testing our ability to repair, but our ability to understand? Against Maya's objections, they'd reconfigured their approach. Instead of fighting the field degradation, they enhanced it in specific patterns, following the ship's own rhythms. The crystalline structures began to pulse with new energy. On the 6th day, the propulsion vortex suddenly collapsed, then reformed into a different configuration, more stable, more efficient. The ship's hull brightened, and for the first time, control systems activated. A message appeared in a universal symbol language. Understanding achieved. Evolution complete. The humans pass. As news spread through the station, Hank realized they'd done more than fix an impossible problem. They demonstrated a uniquely human perspective, seeing not just what something was, but what it could become. The successful transformation of the Nexus 7 changed everything for the Orion Repair Outpost. Within weeks, the station had become the focal point of scientific delegations from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to understand how humans had succeeded where the most advanced civilizations had failed. In the newly expanded conference room, Hank found himself addressing representatives from 12 different species. The Korthal had sent their highest engineering council. Even the reclusive Arcturians had emerged from their nebula colonies to attend. It wasn't advanced technology that solved the Nexus 7 problem, Hank explained. It was perspective. Explain this perspective, demanded the Korthal representative. Your species has barely achieved interstellar travel. Laura stepped forward with historical footage playing behind her. For most of our history, humans had to make do with limited resources. This is a vehicle called a car from our 20th century. When these broke down far from help, humans repaired them with whatever was available. The footage showed people using unusual items to make emergency repairs, a woman using tights to replace a broken fan belt, a man patching a radiator with egg whites. Primitive, murmured one of the delegates. Adaptive, corrected Laura. Humans never developed with perfect technology. We evolved alongside our imperfect creations, constantly improvising. In the back of the room, Maya Bishop nodded. Most advanced civilizations develop technology in clean, logical progressions. Humans, our technological history is messy, full of dead ends and unexpected jumps. A Viridian representative raised a limb. But surely this disadvantage should prevent your success, not enable it. That's exactly the point, Hank said. Where you see systems that should work perfectly, we see systems that might fail in interesting ways. Where you follow protocols, we try the unexpected. After the conference, Hank returned to his quarters to find a private message waiting. A major corporation from the Centauri systems was offering him a position, with compensation that made his eyes widen. They want to poach you too? Susan asked, finding him staring at the offer. You got one? Hank asked. 3 so far. They're recruiting everyone who worked on the Nexus 7. She sat down across from him. Are you considering it? Hank didn't answer immediately. The money would set him up for life, but something felt wrong about it. The next day, reports arrived that several major powers were establishing their own human-style repair facilities. The Korthal had even recruited 50 human engineers with promises of unprecedented technology access. They're trying to replicate our methods, Laura observed during the staff meeting, but they're missing something fundamental. They think it's a technique that can be taught, agreed Maya. But it's more about culture and history. The approach of these new competition stations became clear when a Meridian vessel arrived at Orion after a failed repair attempt elsewhere. The other humans followed perfect procedures, the Meridian captain explained. They used advanced tools and optimal methods. But the ship still isn't fixed, Pete noted, examining the vessel's damaged navigation system. Correct. They were efficient but inflexible. Pete laughed. Sounds like they've hired humans, but made them work like machines. That evening, Hank found Laura on the observation deck, watching the constant stream of arrivals and departures. The diplomatic corps says we've become Earth's most valuable off-world asset, she said. Not our military, not our trade agreements. Repair stations. Hank nodded, thinking about the job offer still waiting for his response. They want to buy what we know. But they don't understand what makes it work, Laura replied. It's not just technical skill. It's curiosity, adaptability, the willingness to try things that shouldn't work. Outside the viewport, a massive Arcturian scientific vessel was departing, its once critical systems now functioning perfectly after human intervention. The secret ingredient isn't in our tools or our training, Hank realized. It's in our history, our messy, imperfect, constantly adapting history. Laura smiled. That's something they can't buy or copy. The alarm blared with an intensity Hank had never heard before. Red emergency lights flashed throughout the station as a voice cut through the chaos. All personnel to emergency stations. Code Black. This is not a drill. Hank raced to the control center where Laura was already coordinating response teams. Her face was grim. "Draconian warship," she explained quickly. "Massive hull breach and coolant system failure. Their warp core is destabilizing." Through the main viewport, Hank saw the imposing vessel. Draconians were a militaristic species known for their advanced weapons and territorial aggression. Their ships were heavily armored and notoriously difficult to access, even for repairs. "They're requesting emergency docking," Laura continued. "If their core goes critical this close to us, the whole station is at risk," Hank finished. "How long?" 20 minutes before catastrophic failure. Maybe less. The warship's captain appeared on the main screen. The reptilian features were tense with strain. "This is Commander Vexcar of the Imperial Warship Dominance. We have suffered attack damage to critical systems. Request immediate assistance." Laura activated the comm. "We're preparing Bay 9 for your arrival. Be advised, safety protocols require evacuation of non-essential personnel from your vessel." "Negative," the commander hissed. "Military protocols prevent." "Your military protocols won't matter if your ship explodes," Laura cut in. "We need space to work, and your crew needs safety." After tense negotiation, the Draconian ship docked. Steam poured from multiple breaches as emergency teams rushed aboard. Hank led the first engineering group into the heart of the vessel. "Core temperature rising fast," reported Susan, who had joined his team. "The coolant system is completely ruptured." Pete examined the ship's schematics. "These containment walls are triple reinforced. We can't access the damaged sections through standard means." Maya Bishop, who had decided to stay at the station after the Nexus 7 incident, pointed to a secondary system. "If we reroute auxiliary power through here, we might stabilize it temporarily." "Not enough time," Hank decided. "We need direct access." He turned to the Draconian engineer who had remained behind. "We need to cut through this bulkhead." "Impossible," the Draconian responded. "That would compromise structural integrity and is against all safety protocols." Hank's patience snapped. "Your safety protocols are about to kill everyone on this station. We're cutting through." As they argued, Laura's voice came through the comm. "Secondary explosion in engineering section. 10 minutes to core breach." The station shook with the impact. In the control center, Laura ordered evacuation of the civilian sections. Throughout the repair outpost, people rushed to escape pods while essential personnel remained at their posts. Back on the warship, Hank made a decision. "Pete, get cutting equipment. Susan, prepare emergency coolant bypass. Maya, calculate minimum safe power levels." "What are you planning?" the Draconian engineer demanded. "Something that breaks every rule in the book," Hank replied. "We're going to intentionally vent the overheating coolant into space through a controlled breach, then instantly seal it with emergency force fields." "That is not standard procedure." "It's not in any procedure," Hank acknowledged. "But it's our only chance." Teams worked frantically as the minutes ticked down. Engineers cut through the reinforced hull, while others prepared the emergency systems. The entire station held its breath. "Breach ready," Pete reported, sweat pouring down his face. "Force field generators in position," Susan confirmed. 5 minutes to core meltdown," Maya warned. Laura's voice came through clearly. "All non-essential personnel have evacuated. Hank, it's your call." Hank took a deep breath. "On my mark. 3, 2, 1. Cut." The hull section blew outward, taking superheated coolant with it. Alarms shrieked as atmosphere vented violently. For 3 terrifying seconds, the vacuum of space pulled at everything. Then the emergency force fields snapped into place. "Core temperature dropping," Maya reported. "It's working." For the next hour, teams raced to install temporary coolant systems and repair critical damage. When they finally emerged, exhausted but successful, they found the Draconian commander waiting. "Your methods were," the commander paused, searching for words, "unconventional, but effective." Laura managed a tired smile. "That's what we do here." 2 weeks after the Draconian warship incident, the Orion Repair Outpost hosted an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from 27 different species filled the newly rebuilt main hall. The emergency repairs and subsequent evacuation had strained the station, but also cemented its reputation across the galaxy. Hank stood awkwardly in his dress uniform as Laura addressed the assembled delegates. The near disaster with the Imperial warship dominance could have ended differently, she said. Traditional repair protocols would have failed. Lives would have been lost. Commander Vexkar of the Draconian fleet stepped forward, his scaled features solemn. The Empire acknowledges this truth. We have long prided ourselves on technological superiority, yet it was human improvisation that saved our vessel and crew. The admission from such a proud military power sent murmurs through the crowd. Therefore, the commander continued, the Empire proposes the establishment of the Galactic Repair Initiative, a program where engineers from all species train together, sharing not just technical knowledge, but problem-solving approaches. Hank watched in amazement as former rivals and cautious allies nodded in agreement. The Corthal representatives, once so dismissive of human methods, were among the most enthusiastic supporters. After the ceremony, Hank found himself on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The repair crew had grown even longer since the incident, with ships from previously uncontacted regions arriving daily. "Made your decision yet?" Susan asked, joining him at the viewport. Hank nodded. The corporate offer had been joined by others. Prestigious positions, research opportunities, even advisory roles to planetary governments, all offering wealth and influence far beyond a station engineer's dreams. "I'm staying," he said simply. Susan smiled. "Me too, Pete, and Maya as well. We're building something important here," Hank said. "Something bigger than just fixing ships." The door hissed open as Laura entered with an unfamiliar human in a formal diplomatic uniform. "Hank, this is Director Carlton from the Earth Diplomatic Corps. He has a proposal for us." The director extended his hand. "Engineer Murray, your team's accomplishments have rewritten humanity's place in the galactic community. What began as a simple repair outpost has become Earth's most valuable diplomatic asset." "We're just fixing what's broken," Hank said modestly. "You're doing much more," the director replied. "You're demonstrating a uniquely human contribution to galactic civilization. Earth is proposing to expand this operation into the interspecies technical exchange, a place where engineers from all worlds can learn from each other, with humans leading the instruction." Hank asked skeptically. "No," Laura interjected, "with humans participating as equals. We have things to teach, but also much to learn." Through the viewport, they watched as a ship unlike any they'd seen before approached the station. Its design incorporated elements from multiple civilizations, a physical representation of cooperation. "Is that?" Hank began. "The first vessel designed by the Joint Engineering Council," the director confirmed, "combining Corthal efficiency, Viridian sustainability, Draconian durability, and human adaptability." Later that evening, after the diplomats had departed, Hank returned to the repair bay where it had all started. The tools were more advanced now. The facilities expanded, but the essence remained the same, solving problems that others couldn't. A young apprentice was working late, struggling with a damaged component from an alien vessel. "Having trouble?" Hank asked. The apprentice looked up. "The manual doesn't cover this type of damage." Hank smiled and pulled up a stool. "Let me tell you a secret about repair work. The manual is just the beginning." As he guided the apprentice through an unconventional solution, Hank felt a profound satisfaction. Outside, ships from across the galaxy waited patiently in line, each carrying problems that only human hands could solve, not because humans were more advanced or intelligent, but because they approached the universe with a willingness to improvise, adapt, and see potential where others saw only failure. That, more than any technology, was humanity's true gift to the stars.